Most people do not fail because they are weak. They fail because they make quitting feel reasonable. That is the real trap. Quitting rarely looks dramatic in the beginning. It looks smart. It sounds mature. It feels temporary. You tell yourself you will restart next week. Then next week becomes next month. And one hard season becomes a smaller life. People who never quit are not fearless. They just think about pain differently. Here's the truth. They do not wake up every morning flooded with motivation, certainty, and perfect discipline, like social media wants you to believe. They wake up with doubts, pressure, and fatigue, but they do not treat those feelings like instructions. That is the first psychological difference. Most people ask, "How do I feel today?" Then they build their effort around the answer. People who never quit ask, "What matters today?" Then they build their behavior around that answer. That shift sounds simple, but it changes everything about how a life unfolds over time. When feelings become the leader, progress becomes unstable, emotional, and easy to negotiate away during difficult seasons. When values become the leader, effort gets steadier, because the mission stays clear even when mood disappears. That is why two people can want success equally and still end up with completely different lives. One person is loyal to emotion. The other is loyal to purpose. The first person works hard when the fire is there and disappears when resistance shows up. The second person expects resistance, makes room for it, and keeps walking anyway. But here's what winners do differently. They stop interpreting difficulty as a warning sign that they are on the wrong path. They understand that meaningful goals naturally create friction, uncertainty, boredom, and moments where the mind begs for relief. That matters because the average person secretly believes progress should feel more rewarding than painful from the start. So when the work becomes repetitive, slow, or invisible, they assume something is broken and begin emotionally checking out. People who never quit see that same phase as the price of building anything real. They know the middle always feels heavier than the beginning because excitement fades before results become obvious. That middle zone breaks most people, not because they lack talent, because they misread the season. They think the silence means failure. They think boredom means misalignment. They think slow progress means they are not made for it. But slow progress is still progress, and boredom is often the test that separates consumers from builders. If you only continue when the process entertains you, you will leave every meaningful path too early. The person who never quits learns to respect repetition before the reward arrives. That is psychology, not just discipline. The mind always wants to conserve energy, avoid uncertainty, and protect identity from embarrassment and loss. That means every big goal automatically activates internal resistance, because growth threatens the version of you that feels familiar. So here is the shift. People who never quit stop expecting comfort while they are becoming someone new. They understand that discomfort is not always damage. Sometimes it is simply the sensation of expansion. Sometimes it is the old self arguing for survival. Think about the person trying to build a business after work. Their body wants rest. Their friends want them available. Their bank account wants quick proof. Their mind wants certainty before commitment. But the future they want requires effort before evidence. And that is where most people walk away. They are willing to work after results show up. They are not willing to work while the scoreboard is still quiet. People who never quit train their minds to stop worshiping immediate proof. They become capable of investing energy into seeds they cannot yet show anybody. That changes the relationship with time. Most people need fast feedback to stay emotionally attached to the process. That is why they keep jumping from plan to plan, habit to habit, and dream to dream. They are not always lazy. Often they are simply addicted to early momentum and allergic to delayed payoff. The first week feels exciting because identity is still fantasy and consequences have not arrived yet. The third month feels different because now the work is ordinary, the doubts are louder, and nobody is clapping. People who never quit become dangerous in that phase. They know consistency counts more when nobody is impressed. They know invisible effort as usually what creates visible breakthroughs later. They do not confuse lack of applause with lack of progress. That mindset shows up in tiny moments more than dramatic speeches. It shows up when you finish the workout you cannot brag about. It shows up when you study after a disappointing result instead of protecting your ego with excuses. It shows up when you make the 10th sales call after hearing no 9 times. It shows up when you rewrite the page, retake the exam, rebuild the plan, and return without a performance. That is what people misunderstand about perseverance. They imagine a heroic personality trait when it is often a quiet relationship with rejection. People who never quit are not people who never feel discouraged. They are people who do not let discouragement decide what happens next. They can feel defeated at night and still continue in the morning. That emotional recovery speed is one of the biggest hidden advantages in life. Because if every setback takes you out for 2 weeks, progress becomes expensive and fragile. If every setback teaches you something and sends you back stronger the next day, momentum compounds. So why do some people recover faster? Because they do not personalize every obstacle. They do not say, "This failed, therefore I am a failure." They say, "This failed, therefore something in the strategy, timing, skill, or execution needs improvement." That difference protects identity while still allowing honesty. And honesty matters because quitting often hides behind fake self-protection. People say they are choosing peace, but sometimes they are simply escaping exposure. They say they are being realistic, but sometimes they are shrinking the dream to reduce the risk of disappointment. They say they are waiting for clarity, but sometimes clarity is being delayed by fear. Here's the truth. The mind is brilliant at producing sophisticated excuses that sound wise enough to obey. That is why people who never quit do not trust every thought that appears under pressure. They examine the thought. They challenge the story. They ask whether the feeling is giving information or just demanding relief. That question can save years. Because some thoughts are signals that a tactic should change, but many thoughts are just short-term emotion trying to shut down long-term growth. Winners learn to separate those two voices. One voice says, "Adjust the method." The other says, "Abandon the mission." The sure people know the difference. That is why non-quitters are rarely stubborn in the childish sense. They are flexible about strategy, but fierce about direction. They will change routines, coaches, calendars, systems, and approaches, but they will not casually surrender the deeper goal. That flexibility keeps persistence intelligent instead of self-destructive. Because never quitting does not mean doing the same thing forever with blind ego. It means staying committed enough to keep learning until the path improves. A person who never quits says, "This version is not working, so I will evolve." A person who quits says, "This version is not working, so maybe I am not capable." One response builds identity. The other erodes it. And identity is everything here. The people who last the longest stop seeing persistence as a temporary act and start seeing it as who they are. They become the kind of person who returns. The kind of person who figures it out. The kind of person who keeps promises to themselves, especially when nobody would punish them for breaking them. Once that identity locks in, discipline gets lighter because behavior becomes aligned with self-respect. You no longer ask whether you feel like doing the work. You ask whether avoiding it matches the standard you have chosen for your life. That is powerful because standards remove drama. If your standard is low, every effort becomes a debate. If your standard is high, many decisions become automatic. You train because that is what you do. You prepare because that is what you do. You recover, learn, and return because that is what you do. The person who never quits reduces negotiation with themselves. They know the longer you argue with discomfort, the stronger discomfort becomes inside your mind. So they move faster than their excuses. Not recklessly. Decisively. They honor the commitment before the emotional courtroom opens and the excuses start presenting evidence. That is why routines matter so much. Routines lower the amount of thinking required to do hard things consistently. And when hard things require less emotional discussion, they get done more often. People who never quit build lives that support endurance instead of sabotaging it. They protect sleep, energy, environment, and focus because they know willpower is not infinite. This is another hidden truth. Perseverance is not just about being mentally tough in dramatic moments. It is also about designing ordinary days so your best intentions stop losing to easy distractions. If your phone owns your attention, your calendar has no structure, and your environment feeds impulse, quitting becomes easier. If your system supports action, resilience becomes more repeatable and less dependent on mood. That is why self-respect often looks practical before it looks inspirational. It looks like turning off noise. It looks like preparing tomorrow tonight. It looks like choosing fewer goals and honoring them longer. It looks like understanding that scattered energy feels busy, but rarely produces transformation. People who never quit are usually selective. They are not chasing every shiny option because they understand the cost of constant starting over. Every new beginning gives you novelty. Every continued effort gives you depth. And depth is where real power lives. Depth builds skill. Depth builds trust. Depth builds reputation. Depth builds the kind of confidence that does not disappear after one bad day. That confidence is earned, not chanted. It comes from having evidence that you can survive your own doubt and still take the next step. That is why people who never quit speak differently to themselves. They do not use language that makes them smaller in moments that already feel hard. They do not constantly say, "I'm behind, I'm terrible, I always mess this up, maybe I'm just not built for this." They use stronger internal language because words shape identity, and identity shapes endurance. They say, "This is hard, but I can handle hard." They say, "I'm learning the pace this goal requires." They say, "I do not need to love this moment to honor the mission." That is not fake positivity. That is psychological leadership. You are teaching your mind how to frame reality under pressure. And the frame matters because the brain follows interpretation faster than facts. Call yourself broken long enough and effort starts feeling pointless. Call yourself capable of adaptation and setbacks become part of the process instead of proof to stop. But here's what winners do differently. They also understand that rest is part of persistence, not the enemy of it. People quit not only because they are weak, but because they run themselves into resentment. They sprint at a pace they cannot sustain, then blame the dream when exhaustion arrives. Non-quitters respect rhythm. They know when to push, when to recover, and when to simplify without surrendering the core mission. That makes them durable. And durability wins more often than intensity. A short burst can impress people. Long disciplined run changes your life. So if you want the psychology of people who never quit, stop looking for a secret personality type. Look at the beliefs they protect and the meanings they refuse to attach to hardship. They believe feelings are real but not always reliable. They believe progress can be invisible before it becomes undeniable. They believe boredom is not the enemy, ego is. They believe setbacks are data. They believe identity can be trained. They believe standards beat moods. They believe direction matters more than speed. And most of all, they believe one difficult season does not get the right to define the whole story. So here's the shift. The next time your mind tells you to back away from something meaningful, do not immediately obey the emotion. Pause long enough to ask a better question. Is this a true signal to change the method, or a temporary urge to escape discomfort? That one question can separate a smaller life from a stronger one. Because the people who build remarkable lives are not always the most gifted in the room. Very often, they are simply the people who stayed in the room long enough to become undeniable. They kept showing up while others kept restarting. They kept learning while others kept explaining. They kept building while others kept doubting. And in the end, persistence did what motivation alone never could. It turned pressure into capacity. It turned repetition into mastery. It turned ordinary effort into uncommon results. So remember this. You do not need a perfect mind to stop quitting. You need a trained one. A mind that can feel resistance without calling it fate. A mind that can face slow seasons without betraying the mission. A mind that knows this simple truth. The moment you stop making quitting feel reasonable is the moment your future starts changing. And once you learn that, you become very hard to stop.